Photography as we know it today is far different from how it began. In the 5th century BC, Chinese and Greek philosophers described the basic principles of optics and the camera. They wrote about how an image was formed upside down from a pinhole on the opposite wall. This is known as camera obscura. In 1664 to 1672, Sir Isaac Newton discovers that white light is composed of different colors by refracting white light off of a prism. In 1685, the vision of a box form of a camera that was portable and small was envisioned by Johann Zahn, though it would be nearly 150 years before technology was able to bring his vision to life. In 1717, Johann Heinrich Schultz discovered that silver nitrate darkened upon exposure to light. In 1816, Frenchman Joseph Nicephore Niepce constructed a wood camera fitted with a microscope lens. In 1826, this same Frenchman invented the heliograph, which he used to make the earliest known permanent photograph from nature known as View from the Window at Le Grand. In 1837, Louis Daguerre invented the first practical photographic process, which was widely used in portraiture until the end of the 1850s. On the back of the first picture it reads, "The first light picture ever taken." In 1861, Scottish physicist James Clerk Maxwell produced the first color photograph. 1884 to 1888, George Eastman introduced celluloid-based film and the small, portable, easy-to-use box camera. His tagline was, "You press the button, we do the rest." Eastman made up the name Kodak simply from his love of the letter K. Kodak created a new type of photography, one that was for the everyday person to capture everyday moments. Kodak moments, if you will. This original Kodak camera, introduced by George Eastman, placed the power of photography in the hands of anyone who could press a button. Earlier cameras were limited to those with extensive training. Unlike earlier cameras that used a glass plate negative for each exposure, the Kodak came preloaded with a 100 exposure roll of flexible film. In 1888, the original Kodak sold for $25, loaded with a roll of film and included a leather carrying case. After 100 pictures had been taken on the film strip, the camera could be returned to the Kodak factory for developing and printing at a cost of $10. The camera, loaded with a fresh roll of film, was returned with the negatives and mounted circular snapshots. Kodak advertisements from 1888 also state that any amateur could finish his own pictures, and spare rolls of film were sold for $2. This changed the face of photography up until the age of digital photography. In this illustration, we can see the photography industry illustrated as to how the market appeared before the invention of digital photography. Kodak, represented by the black square, has been sitting at the top of the hill for many years as the leader in film photography. Digital photography, represented by the star, was just beginning. Stephen Sasson, an engineer who actually worked at Eastman Kodak, built the first recorded digital camera in 1975 using the CCD from Fairchild Semiconductor. It was a working prototype of a camera and not a commercial variant. It could capture an image of 100 by 100 pixels, and it needed 23 seconds to make an image and record it on a tape. Even so, Kodak continued selling film. By 1976, 85% of all film cameras and 90% of all film sold in the United States was Kodak. But rather than looking at the future, Kodak executives were convinced that, quote, no one would ever want to look at their pictures on a television set. That was the beginning of the end for Kodak. Film photography continued for several more years, and by 2001 the film sales peaked worldwide, but as the president of Fujifilm remembers, quote, "A peak always conceals a treacherous valley." Digital photography became more and more commonplace and was gaining ground on film photography. By 2010, the worldwide demand for photographic film had fallen to less than a tenth of what it had been only 10 years prior. In this illustration, we can see how the industry typography has changed. Kodak, who stayed their course on film photography, falls from their peak on top of the hill and has been overshadowed by digital photography. How did this happen? Well, digital photography surprisingly had its beginnings way back in the 1950s. In 1952, the first videotape recorder was developed and was the first device that did not use film, but instead used a coded signal on tape in order to record. The code was converted into a picture. In 1957, Russell A. Kirsch actually created the very first digital image, which was a portrait of his son. The picture was black and white and very small, and it only had 176 pixels per side. In 1969, Willard Boyle and George Smith developed CCD chips, also known as charged coupled device, and these were used in video cameras. By 1975, cameramen for broadcast television were actually using CCD cameras. By December of 1975, Stephen Sasson of Eastman Kodak made the first true digital camera using CCD chips. It weighed a whopping 8 pounds, had a resolution of only 0.01 megapixels, and it took 23 seconds to create a digital image, which was then recorded onto a cassette. This obviously still did not produce the quality of photos that film was able to produce at this point. By 1981, Sony Mavica used 2 CCD chips and recorded images on a floppy disk, which could only store about 25 images. In 1991, Kodak introduced the Nikon F3, the first digital camera with the ability to change lenses, also known as a DSLR. It cost a whopping $30,000 and was actually taken aboard NASA spacecraft and used in space. In 1992, the Logitech Photoman was the first commercially available digital camera and produced pictures that were 320 by 240 pixels. It had 1 megabyte of internal memory and cost about $1,000. This still did not compete with the quality of photos produced by film. In 1995, the Casio QV10 was the first camera to have an LCD screen to preview images. In 1996, the first compact flash memory cards were developed. Throughout the 2000s, what's known as the pixel race began as many competitors began developing cameras with more and more pixels, which created better quality photos. Cameras became cheaper as the technology grew. By the year 2012, Kodak had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So why did Kodak lose its top position in the field of photography? The reason has been referred to as death by digital. Even though Kodak invented the digital camera, Kodak refused to pursue that avenue to business growth for fear that it would become a rival to its core business of film. Their film success actually played a big role in their resistance to change towards digital. Kodak could have had their own dual transformation. Transformation A could have been their continued pursuit of film photography, and Transformation B could have and should have been a pursuit of digital photography. Instead, they stayed on the same course as they had been for years, even decades before, because they believed that the market would never change from their love of film photography. Wow, how wrong they were. With digital photography came a new marketplace and new consumer attitudes. No longer did people want to wait to see their film developed when they could instantly see their photo right there on the camera and then delete it if it didn't turn out the way they wanted. No more wasted film and no more wasted money. The customer's wants and needs changed, but Kodak did not. Kodak did eventually see the error of their way and jumped back on the bandwagon of digital photography, but it was a bit too late. There were already several competitors who had marketed digital cameras, Fuji, Canon, and Nikon, just to name a few. These competitors are still going strong in today's market as they continue to develop smaller cameras that produce better and better photos.